Good morning. Is it 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock? What time is it? I think it's daylight savings. So how did this time change occur? I think it's us humans that determine this. We make up these things. Just like borders between states and between countries. I could remember as a kid on vacation, my sister and I were at that state line in Nevada. And we stood in front of that sign. And then what we did was we jumped from one side to the other. Now California, now Nevada, back and forth. But actually, there wasn't any line like there was on the map. And this was imaginary, and we had a great time thinking we were jumping between two states. Now, the same kind of thing is true for time zones. We could be in one time zone at 9 o'clock and another one at 10 o'clock. So how does this happen? Is it natural? Or is it man-made? I think we humans really determine a lot of things that's convenient for our lives. And that in nature, things are very light and flexible. And for us humans, we like to see things in concrete terms. Now, borders between countries. Now, there's a push to put up walls. And I think if we ask Germany, we find out that walls don't work. They tore one down. And I think China would tell us that if we make the walls interesting, in a few hundred years from now, they could become tourist attractions. And in San Diego, we know that they don't quite work real well because I think in San Diego and Mexico, they're pretty good at making tunnels that go under walls. And then there are animals who don't really know about these lines. They could be in a national park and be safe, and then they wander outside these invisible lines, and then they're not safe, and people want to kill them. So we humans argue and fight about these artificial lines, and we wonder who owns this side or that side, who owns the land. And these, again, are made for human convenience, and yet we fight a lot about them. What about religion? What's natural and what is man-made? Did God determine the boundaries of different countries, or did humans? And did God determine what's right or wrong, or did we humans? And as humans, do we decide some things and then claim that God did it? We humans make a lot of decisions, and then we claim that it's from God. But we don't know which God, because there are many cultures and many gods. Now, people fight about this more than, I think, borders. Now, with gods, there have been cultures that have come and gone, and therefore the personal gods have come and gone. We can think about the Egyptians or the Aztecs or people who lived on Easter Island. Those cultures existed, they were great, and now they're gone, and so are their gods. So what about Buddhist and Buddhism? Asking these kind of questions may help us to better understand our relationship to Amida Buddha. We have our historic Shakyamuni Buddha, who was trying to understand life. And when he was enlightened, he had a certain aura around him. So the first passerby named Apaka came by and noticed his aura and said, "Sir, are you a god?" And the Buddha replied, "No, I am not. I am awake." And that's what the word Buddha means, the enlightened one, or one who is awake. So what he was saying is that this enlightenment is an experience of truth. And what he was telling us in the Dharma is how truth can help us negotiate through life. He's explaining how life works. When the Buddha was asked how the world was created, he was silent, because he knew that if there were an answer, it would not help us in our present situation. He gave the analogy of a man being shot by an arrow. And if the man were shot, would he ask, "Oh, what kind of wood is this? I wonder what kind of bird this feather is." And as he's contemplating the origins of the arrow, he might die. And so he said, we are like this man shot by an arrow. We have a limited period of time of life. And if we're pondering these questions that aren't critical, we will expend our life without meaning. And so what he talked about is life and awaken to the beauty of it. Now, the Buddha being human meant that he had the same conditions that we live in. And therefore, we can look to him to realize that we too can awaken to the truth that he guides us to. Now, the fact that the Buddha was a human and not a god is very optimistic. We can also look at this and be assured that we face the same challenges as the Buddha saw, that all humans are affected by sickness, old age, and death. And that's the issues that we deal with. And so what he was telling us was that our life is not really dependent on some external god or deity determining our lives. It depends on us and how we think and how we perceive the world. It is our perspective. Now, we have examples like Copernicus and Galileo, who looked up at the heavens and were in opposition to the present thinking at that time. And they said that, the sun doesn't revolve around the earth. It's the earth that revolves around the sun. And so they discovered something that was already there. Newton, who talked about gravity, didn't invent it. He discovered it. Madame Curie researched on X-rays, again, something that was there. So the great scientists are telling us what already exists. And that's what the Buddha has done. He is describing truth, nature, life, the human condition. And these things have always existed. So the main purpose of Buddhism is to help us decrease our anxiety and raise our settled mind where we feel comfortable and happy. And he shows us how things work. Talked about interdependence, impermanence, dependent origination, all these fancy things, karma, causes and conditions. But what he's saying here is that we have an ability to determine what works and what doesn't. And so we can create our own suffering or happiness. Now, the Buddha taught these very profound truths in a way that was appropriate for people at that time. And if we think about it, probably prior to the 18th century or so, all cultures attributed many unknown things to gods or deities. And so it's not unusual that the truth or Buddha, Amida Buddha, was depicted in human form. Now, again, historically, Shakyamuni Buddha, after his death, was not depicted in human form. Whenever he was represented, there might be a throne, an umbrella, or footprints. And it was a few centuries later that human figures of the historical Buddha started to form. And I think the Muslims also have this thought that the truth is so profound that a human figure cannot really represent it clearly. And Renyo said that the Chinese characters of Namo Amida Butsu is preferable to a picture or statue of Amida Buddha because it is more abstract and we're not thinking of it as a person. And yet we have a figure of the Buddha, Amida Buddha. And Japanese often refer to Amida as Oya-sama, or honorable parent, because we have the human conditions of wisdom and compassion, and we have the sense of being loved just as we are. And so again, it is important that we have these different forms that we can attribute to the Buddha and to truth. Now, again, to explain this deep philosophical thought, the Buddha talked about 3 bodies of the Buddha. And this can get a little complex, but it's important that we understand this. The purest form is Dharmakaya. And there are other words. We hear the words Tathagata, thusness, Buddha nature. This refers to this inconceivable existence. And I'll explain it a little later, but there is this thought of the universe. Now, we use that word, but do we really know what that is? I think it's beyond our thought. And so there's this middle level, what's called Sambhogakaya, and this is where we place Amida Buddha. And this is where Amida represents that pure form that is beyond our comprehension. And So we realize that this human form or the letters or the voicing of Namo Amida Butsu points to a deeper experience. And that, again, by thinking of this as a parent or someone that really cares for us, helps us really understand this. Now, the third level that the Buddha talked about was Nirmanakaya, the historical Buddha. And being that he was a human and not a god, means that we too, as humans, can have a similar experience of awakening, that we are moving toward this truth. So what does the three bodies of the Buddha mean to us? There are several things. One, as I said, this first level is beyond thought. So let's look at where we actually are. We're on this planet and we see things, close by. But if we really realize what's happening, we do have astronauts circling the Earth, and what they tell us is that this one Earth is circling the sun, and that the sun is only one star in a whole galaxy of the Milky Way, and that there are billions of stars in this galaxy. And what goes beyond my thought is that there are billions of galaxies, and that this universe is expanding. Can we really think about that? Is that, something we can think about as we're in our day-to-day life? And so we have this middle level of Amida Buddha, which connects us to this inconceivable arena of light and life. And that what it's telling us is that we are all connected, interdependent. We're all part of life. We breathe in, breathe out the air that's all around us. And we are in relationship to all other beings, in all inanimate objects, everything on this planet. So both physically and spiritually, we are interdependent. Now, this pandemic with the coronavirus is an example. We are interconnected, and this disease is spread because we are interacting with each other so closely. And so it's important to prevent the spread of this, to wear masks and to stay socially distant. And of course, there are some who do not do that. But we really request that people wear masks because it depends on each of us to help each other. The third part of the Buddha is that he is awake. And so we are waking up to this truth of interdependence. And as I said from the start, some of these things are man-made. We think about borders, we think about time zones. Well, our bodies makes us think that we are separate beings. And yet the truth is that we are all together, both physically and spiritually. Because we know that as we eat and interact with each other, we are part of everyone else. And we also have not only the spread of the disease, but it is part of our human community that has come up with a prevention, the vaccine. And so there are physicians and researchers, scientists, who have come up with a vaccine to help us prevent us from getting sick from this vaccine. And so I implore all of you to get a vaccine. Now, we have the choice of choosing ignorance that separates us and makes us think these artificial borders are real and that separate beings are different. Or we can look at the truth that we are interconnected and that we can't live without others, that opposition is part of life. To give an example, I remember in high school, we were to play a basketball game, very important because there was a rival school coming over and this was going to be a very important game. And everyone was very excited and waiting for that to happen. Well, it didn't happen. Why? Because the bus that was to bring the other team broke down. And so they didn't come. And so no opposition, no gain. And that's kind of what life is about. If there are no obstacles, there's no life, no gain. And so our life is about dealing with all the things that we encounter in life. And this is what makes it interesting and makes life worthwhile. So to sum things up, the Buddha is not a god. He experienced the extremes of life, the life of a prince, the life of a penniless monk. And he found that the middle path was great. that this is our path, and this was brought about by his insightful meditation, and that the human condition creates these artificial borders of time, of land, and of human bodies, and that we are actually connected both physically and spiritually. And this is what we're reminded of continually when we say Namo Amida Butsu. This says, I'm one with infinite light and immeasurable life. And so, again, it reminds us that rather than thinking of our simplistic life just on this earth and all the petty things we go through, that we are blessed to live a human life at this time. And the voicing of Namo Amida Butsu really wakes us up and has us appreciate what we have. And so in Buddhism, we have harmony with opposition, and that we know that it is our own hearts, minds, spirit, and conduct that determines our bliss or our suffering. And it is the Nembutsu, Namo Amida Butsu, that helps to awaken us. So please join me in voicing the Nembutsu, Namo Amida Butsu, to express our deepest appreciation for realizing that the life we have is so unique and we are connected despite these human false thoughts that we are separate and that these artificial lines of borders and time actually exist, because we are all in harmony in oneness. So please join me in reciting the Nembutsu. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo.